Hi everyone, welcome to the first week for EDBED2008. My name's Naomi, I'm your unit coordinator, and this recording is to take you through the content for the first week, basically looking at the unit overall and understanding what early literacy means and what you're going to need to do to demonstrate your learning in this unit. So hopefully by now you've read the unit description and you've started or are completing some of the tasks and the readings in the week 1 section of Moodle. There's a lot of reading that you need to do in this unit. Each week you will find that there's a Moodle book, that's the weekly reading, and there's also a reading embedded in that with some focus questions to guide your understanding that you'll need to post your responses to in the forum, and that will help you to engage in some quality research around this really important topic and also support you with your assignments. All right, what is literacy? So this is about exploring your prior knowledge. So if you have a bit of paper, press pause now and just take a moment to think about what you know about literacy. What are the key words that come to mind, and what sort of questions or things do you have in your mind that are needing answering or exploring at the moment? So literacy isn't static. It changes and evolves to reflect the changing needs of society. And that's an accurate capturing of the dynamic nature of literacy. As we evolve, so do the literacy skills that are required. We need to continually adapt to new technologies, to cultural shifts and social demands, and the ever-changing landscape of communication and knowledge. And so for that reason, the Victorian curriculum puts literacy as well as numeracy and digital literacy at the centre, and they describe it as a foundational skill that's used across the entire curriculum. So that means that literacy is critical for enabling learning in other areas, in all other areas of the curriculum for all students. So without literacy, students can't fully engage with or understand subjects like health and PE, science, the arts. And this is my favourite one by Peter Freebody, who's one of the most influential researchers in literacy education. And he says that literacy is the overarching skill that begets other skills. So without literacy, learning in all other areas is extremely limited. Literacy underpins everything we do. So, you know, begets means it means to bring about or give rise to. So students develop literacy by listening to, reading, viewing, speaking, listening, writing different texts, and using language for different purposes in a range of contexts. And these components are interconnected. So for example, reading is enhanced by strong listening skills. So literacy is often associated with reading and writing, but it's much broader than that. So success in learning areas such as all of the other parts of the curriculum all depend on literacy. I want you to think about now, what do you think are the most significant challenges in early literacy? And what have you heard about? What do you currently know about the effective teaching of literacy in the early years? So I guess what I'm doing here is establishing the importance of literacy. And there's some research snippets there on the slide that I'd like you to read. So those little snippets, I guess, help build the argument that literacy empowers and liberates people. it's not just a right, a human right to become literate, but it actually improves our lives. It expands our capabilities, which then reduces the chances of poverty and illness, and it increases participation in society and has positive effects on society and health. All right, so now have a look at the and read the ALIA Declaration. That's in the Week 1 section of Moodle in the folder called Tutorial Resources. Each weekly section will have a little folder like that for you to dig into and look at some extra resources and highlight any sections that you find interesting in that ALIA Declaration. Okay, so let's look closer at the Victorian curriculum, and we're looking, of course, at the new version, version 2. And we can see that there are 3 broad strands. There's language, literature, and literacy. Now, it's not by chance that literature is in between language and literacy. Literature is the vehicle for understanding language and for practicing literacy. So it's through literature that children encounter rich oral language, new vocabulary, varied sentence structures, and extended discourse. And at the same time, it provides an authentic opportunity to engage in literacy practices such as listening, reading, discussing, writing about texts. So in that way, literature connects spoken language to written language. So let's talk more about the connections. This is something I got AI to put together, and you can see how messy it looks, but I'll try to unpack it with you. It's trying to highlight oral language, reading and writing, and how they develop together. And so that means that growth in one area can support growth in the others, which is also known as interdependence. So they not only develop together, but they work together and they actively support one another. And there's another way of saying that is to say that they have reciprocity. They're reciprocal in nature. The other thing that AI did when I was asking it to put this together is it highlighted there's the non-linearity. So there's no straight sequence. So there's no, we don't develop oral language first, then reading, then writing. Children develop skills in overlapping, uneven ways, and progress can accelerate in one area while another area develops more slowly. It also highlights that early writing really matters. Writing is something that not something that only happens after children learn to read. Early writing, like scribbling, labelling, invented spellings, attempts at writing their name or sentences, all of those things that children do strengthen their understanding of sounds, letters, word structure, and how texts communicate meaning. It also highlights that explicit instruction is essential. These connections don't develop automatically. We need effective teaching to make those links between them visible and deliberate. So, for example, teachers might explicitly model how a text is structured during shared reading and then support students to use the same structure when they're writing. Okay, so think about those words that I've used, so reciprocity, interdependence, and think about how you might describe the connections between these components of literacy. So how do we become literate? Well, early literacy development doesn't just happen. It happens as a social process. So from birth, early literacy development occurs in a social way, so through experiences and relationships with caregivers, parents, extended family, educators, early childhood educators. So we have listening and talking and babble and games and interactions. All of those early experiences contribute to literacy development. So therefore, it's a social process. It's embedded in children's relationships, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Let's have a look now at a clip of my daughter a few years ago now, reading, and I say reading, it's really role play reading what she's doing, but let's look at what she's doing with mum and dad and think about which early literacy skills does she demonstrate?
No. It's from why around it and sat on the head of a auntie called lizard.
Toad.
Good girl, baby.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, the one last page. The hat.
It spun through the air.
Wild and sat on the head of a country old baboon.
Oh, the magic hat.
The magic hat moves like that. Spun for the wild.
And sat on the head of a sleepy old
mother.
What's next? Sleepy old
bear. Whoa. You don't like bears, don't you?
No, Mummy.
No, because they have sharp claws and sharp teeth. The magic cat moves like this and moves like that. It's fun for the wild and sat on the head of a kangaroo. Boing, boing, boing. This is the last page. And then it stands for the sky and wild and sat on the head of a
lofty
giraffe.
And then
a skip and a hop. With the magic hat.
the magician appeared with a sign that said,
Stop. He's holding on. And you stop there. Now, the last page. Everyone was back into people, and everyone just sat, and he's pointing down the wizard. Now, he went to a baby swan and gave it a tick. Now, everyone's back into people, and everyone was confused. And there's a spotty egg there.
yes,
You like eggs.
I know.
And you like Noel, don't you?
I do.
and turn back into set. That's the end.
Thank you for reading us a book.
Thank you, Mummy. No, you just have our dinner now.
Let's have our dinner now. She kept thinking it was the last page, the last page, because she couldn't say the L sound, which is common for a child that's nearly 2 years old. What did you think about the literacy skills that she might have been just demonstrating there? And was that reading? Interesting, isn't it? So we can see that there were some things going on there. She had some awareness of print, understanding that the print carries a message, and that books are handled in a particular way, that we turn the page, even if we turn the page and then lick our finger afterwards, that text is read from left to right. Well, maybe not quite. She's not quite getting that part. I did see her eyes, though. She was looking at words and at the pictures separately at certain parts. She certainly has some oral language. She's learning some words and some pronunciation and talk, and listening. She's able to memorize parts of the story. Engagement with text, or the interaction with texts, that ability to participate in that imaginary play with her doll and share the reading, as well as interacting with others and interacting with the doll as well as mum and dad, some back and forth, having a knowledge of words and their meanings. So she also did notice that in the picture there was a stop sign. She said the wizard appeared with a sign that said stop. She also knew some words like confused. Maybe that was from memory at the time, I'm not sure. But then there's also this narrative discourse, this concept of knowing the structure of a story. She knew that there was a beginning and there was an end, that the characters turned back into people. And so all of these emergent literacy skills are the precursors to learning to read and write. And they develop before actual school. And these have been measured to be incredibly important predictors of later literacy development. So let's narrow in on that notion of narrative discourse. So early narrative competence, or an ability to understand the structure of a story, is fundamental to learning to read, because it helps children map their understanding onto a text. It's like knowing basically where the centre of town is on a map of Ballarat, and then therefore you know the town, therefore you're able to read the map a little bit more accurately. That's the kind of thing that we want to have children develop in children before they actually get to schools, an understanding of what is print, what's the structure of a story. All right, so how does this all happen? Well, lots of new research into the brain and it's the brain's structures during reading development have led to lots of new understandings and this new sort of body of research called the science of reading. And what we have learned from all of that research is that language is something we're born to learn. It's already there with structures in our brain. We're born with them. There's areas of the brain like Broca's area, which is involved in the production of speech near the motor centre of the brain. We know that Wernicke's area has to do with understanding and creating meaning in speech. And there's all of this incredible research, but we don't need to know really all about the parts of the brain and know what they're called just to understand that we're born with the physical brain structures learn to read and learn to speak, but not for reading. This is where it gets really cool and interesting. Okay, so we're born with the ability to learn to speak and listen, okay, and have oral language and language, but reading is not innate. Okay, so we've got this neuroscience research that shows that the physical structure of our brains actually changes as we learn to read. And we know that the brain has evolved for hundreds of thousands of years as a speaking and listening brain, but written language has only existed for 6,000 years, so that's really a tiny blip in human evolution. So unlike speech, which develops uniformly the same way across languages and cultures, so if you get the brain of someone that's born in Italy compared to the brain of someone born here, those developmental processes will be pretty much the same when it comes to learning to speak, okay? But reading only occurs through the intentional appropriation, the intentional use of existing structures within the brain. Let's listen to Dr. David Sousa. He's an educational neuroscientist, and I've actually listened to him speak in Melbourne. He's really fascinating. Let's listen to what he says about the role of teachers and this understanding of the brain.
So I thought about, you know what teachers are? I mean, what is teaching? I mean, how many of you had to take education courses at some point in your life? Raise your hand. Yeah, most of you, vast majority of you did. Did you have to write sometime what you think teaching was all about? And I read textbooks, and I read those. I taught undergraduate and graduate college for 10 years. I had did a little bit of that just to see what they thought. And I got these wonderful flowery things. Teaching is the act by which somebody who knows something imparts knowledge, and on, all that crap. It really boils down to a very, very simple thing. And I'd like to share with you Sousa's definition of what is teaching. This is it. It's the only profession on this planet whose job it is to change the human brain every single day. That's what we do. Now, I have said this 1,000 times all over the world, and every time I say it, I get shivers up my spine. I'm getting shivers. I'm getting goosebumps right now. Just the thought of it. My job here today is to change your brain. It's just to make some new connections. In other words, I'll make it even shorter for you. Teachers are brain changers. Well, damn it, if we're brain changers, doesn't it make sense that the more we understand about how that brain works, the better we can be at that? Hello? It's okay to talk back to me. Does that make sense? Yeah, by the way, talk. This is I think, a revolution in our profession. It's a rejuvenation. So let's be happy about it. It's a wonderful time to be in this profession. Sure, we have our problems. Never before have communities demanded so much of our schools. We don't just teach kids anymore, we raise kids in many places. In local parentis has never been truer. But the good news is we're learning more about how this brain works. And technology can help us with that. But like any good innovation, it has its positives and it has its negatives. We'll talk more about the positives today. We're brain changers. When you are in that classroom and you are working with your students, this is what's happening in their brain.
Okay, I'll stop it there. I love his enthusiasm, and I love that he boils it down to something so simple but so incredibly powerful. That the implications are for teachers is that, you know, that we actually change children's structures in their brain. There's structural changes as we're teaching them, especially when we're teaching them to read. So, yeah, huge implications for us. So let's look at this now about how learning to read actually structures the brain. So what we can see is some little pictures that show the number of synapses in a human brain at certain points of their development, okay? So synapses are the things that fire and connect and enable thinking and learning, okay, basically. When we think about looking at that image on the screen, a newborn has very, very few synapses, but at 1 month, in 1 month's time, they start to grow. At 9 months, there's lots of synapses. At 2 years old, about the same age as what Imogen was when we watched that clip. She was about 2 years old there, I think. There's so much going on. The synaptic density, the number of synapses developing, are the most that she will ever have, according to research current research. So then as an adult, you can see some thicker branches there. That's where our synapses start to prune off. Some get thicker and some prune or are cut away and go and disintegrate. So we have the most synaptic density that we'll ever have when we're 2 years old, and then it starts to prune away. All right, so because of this, we have to understand that a beginning reading brain is working very hard. We're activating much broader and more distributed regions of the brain than an expert reader. Early reading is full of effort and it's neurologically demanding. And over time, as we practice and we get more experience, our brains start to organize itself. So initially, it's really full of struggle and there's effort, but it gradually becomes more efficient because those pathways, those synapses become streamlined for decoding and integrating more complex processes. So for you and I, we read in an astonishingly fast rate. You know, it takes no more than about half a second to read a single word for us. That's rapid recognition because we're instantaneously integrating cognitive, linguistic and emotional processes, coordinating across multiple brain regions, and there's billions of neurons firing, and that what feels automatic is actually the result of extraordinarily sophisticated neural networks operating with lots of synapses and remarkable efficiency. So there's all of that going on for us, but we have to go back and remember how much effort is needed to learn to read. Okay, so because of all of this, because literacy is so important, reading is so important, the impact that it has on children, as you can imagine, is incredible, and therefore we have a lot of debate, a lot of very vicious debate about what the teachers should do. Should we teach reading? So what have you heard about this social commentary, this debate on the teaching of reading or literacy? What do you know about the current debate about the teaching of reading? Let's look at some of the recent debate. I'm going to take you through a critical and close reading. This is something you might do at a secondary level or later in primary school, and we'll get into how we teach reading, of course, throughout this unit. But I'm going to take you guys through this as a close read. Okay. Now, you go to your resources folder for week 1, get these readings, go to page 8 of the Grattan report. It's called the Reading Guarantee. This is what they claim. I'll just get my laser pointer. Australia has an unacceptably high number of children and adolescents who fail to reach minimum proficiency standards in reading. And we can see there's a 4. It's number 4 afterwards, and that means that there's a footnote. A footnote is more information included down the bottom in smaller text. So then they assert down in the footnote that Not only are there too many students, not only are too many students not proficient, some don't even have basic reading skills. According to PISA, the OECD's program for international student assessment, Australia has 21% of 15-year-olds in the very bottom rung of performance, which is higher than similar countries such as Singapore, which have 11%, Ireland, who has 11%, and Canada has 18%. Thompson et al. 23. Okay, so where did they get that information? And that's the citation. So they're saying the situation is bad. Australia's worse than other countries, and they're saying that they get the data, they're drawing from the PISA data. Now you need to know what PISA is so you can understand this. What is PISA? It's a test for 15-year-olds, focuses on reading, maths and science, and it's conducted globally, and there's a lot of countries that participate. They send their 15-year-olds off to do this test. They do it every 3 years. Okay? So think about, how does this article frame the issue of reading? I mean, we can even just look at the title of this section and understand how they frame it, yeah? Does it seem true? Is it trustworthy? Is it compelling? Many of you would probably say yes. Now we can assume that it's accurate, right? And many people do, because the Grattan reports that they put out are often very influential, particularly when it comes to political decision making. But it's important that we do read critically. Okay. Let's now read critically. Let's look at what can we find out about this claim, about these PISA results? Well, in terms of the PISA results, the Grattan Institute, they claimed that Australia's bad. We've got 21% of our 15-year-olds on the very bottom rung. That was their words, okay? They drew from the PISA data. If we look at the Productivity Commission report, which actually looks deeper into the data and is a little bit more methodologically accurate, this is what they say. PISA results have declined, driven in part by changes in student cohorts. Okay, so they acknowledge that there's some decline, but they're talking about there's a change in the groups of students. Let's look at this dot point. Well, even if I just skim this first paragraph, I can see the last part of that sentence says there are 3 important caveats to bear in mind. Okay, things that we need to be careful of when we're interpreting the data. As made clear by the OECD, the decline from 2015 to 2018 is not statistically significant for maths and reading. Put simply, this means there is not sufficient evidence to suggest students' ability declined over this period. What? Well, that's a different story. Not sufficient evidence. The data's not statistically significant. Looking further back, when the decline in results between 2012 and 2018 is statistically significant for maths and reading, in part, it reflects changes in the composition of students sitting the test. So there's different students sitting the test, different differences in the group. As an example, in 2012, 19% of the 15-year-olds sitting the test were in year 11, but in 2018, this dropped to only 7%. This means only 12% of the students in the sample had an entire year less schooling than in the previous samples. Okay, interesting. So a little bit more behind that data, isn't there? And this is on the next page of that report. Declines in Australia's results in international testing of reading among 15-year-olds likely overstate the deterioration of these skills, because those kids had had a year's less schooling to develop their reading skills compared to the ones that started later. So what does this mean? This means that both of those reports are discussing the same data, but they are framing it differently. Yeah? The data doesn't just speak for itself. Cherry picking and selecting and then framing that data has a big influence on the way that it's interpreted. Omitting and not including some of it, or some of that part of the information, is just as powerful as including some parts, which is what the Grattan Institute did. And this is important because the Grattan Institute released these documents over, and policy and politicians look at them, and but they need careful interpretation. The media and the public and politicians like to claim that our literacy rates are declining, that it's all, fire and brimstone, that the sky is falling, blah, blah, blah. But it's actually more accurate to say that our literacy rates have not moved. They've remained flat from 2013 to 2021. So this is still a cause for concern, but the data is not as straightforward as some claim. Now why would I bother talking to you about any of this? Because when you go out there as teachers, you're going to get all kinds of products being sold to you as a school. They're going to come and say, look, buy this product, buy this program, buy this teaching tool, buy these lesson plans, spend big dollars on this and give me the money. I can sell you the silver bullet. This is a solution for our declining literacy. That's what they do. And then sometimes there's other big things that happen that influence the ways that teachers work, the things that we have to include in our literacy blocks. It matters. Understanding this matters because it will influence your work as a teacher. A friend of mine, Martina Tassone, who works at the University of Melbourne, has written this recently, and I just love it. Australia's right-wing media have a lot to answer for in terms of fostering narrow approaches to curriculum pedagogy and assessment. In England and the United States, the aggressive media commentary on the teaching of reading has contributed to policy mandates that demand or exclude specific literacy instructional practices. So are we going to end up just like England and the US if we keep listening to the media? And the Grattan Institute is also responsible. Then they're going to shape education in a significant way, particularly in the context of literacy and reading instruction. The intersection of media, politics and education has significant implications for literacy instruction and for your work, your future work as a teacher. So it's essential that you critically engage with this stuff and advocate for evidence-based, critical reading, flexible teaching approaches that support all students. Okay, that's my rant. I'm going to drop the mic there. Okay, now let's talk about some core things that you need to understand in this unit, because I'm going to show you the research that can be trusted, the research that is rigorous, and this is one of them, the big six. All right, this is about what do we need to know about, what do we need to develop in children so that they can learn to read. These things contribute to reading development, have been proven thoroughly by research. So I want you to go into those and learn about them. You're going to need to learn about them carefully for your first assignment. We're going to talk more about them in the coming weeks. Okay, so these are the elements that contribute to reading development. They are interconnected, interdependent, reciprocal. Do you remember what those words mean? It means that you can't just teach them in isolation. They don't develop one after the other. There is no order or hierarchy. They are working together when they they work together to develop reading. So think about what you know about each of those, what you need to know, and see if you can come up with a little definition for each. All right, here are your assignments for this unit. The hurdle task is a literacy test. It's not little, but it's a literacy test that you won't have seen before. It's different to the one that you did in EDBED2008 last year, if you did that last year. It is essential that you complete it, even if you've done the land type. Teachers need to continually learn. They need to be always improving. Even I am. I've been in the role, been in the game for many years. I'm still learning, and I'm always improving my personal literacy skills. So this is for you to do by week 3. Do the test, reflect on your answers, and write yourself some goals. What are you going to learn more about? What do you need to understand more of? Your first assessment task, which is marked as out of 40, the hurdle task is just pass-fail. The first assignment, which is marked out of 40 and is worth 40%, is an essay on reading. This is where you need to demonstrate your understanding of the research and be critical of the research, kind of like how I was in those past few slides. What is it that we know about reading and the development of reading? What does research say? And you need to demonstrate your understanding of that. You can use AI to help you write the essay, but there are really strict caveats and conditions that you need to be aware of. That's all explained in the Moodle books, in the About Assessment Task 1 Moodle book. If you don't demonstrate that, if you don't follow the instructions, if you're using AI, and we're a bit worried, we see that there's a lot of AI being used and you haven't declared it, you haven't shown your own thinking, you might be asked to complete an interactive oral interview with the lecturer or with me. Okay? It's there to use as a tool. It's not there to just replace your own thinking, your own brain. All right? That's the first assignment. That's due in week 6 on a Sunday. The last assignment is where you analyse a student writing sample and then plan for them. You plan two lessons for the student based on what they can show, what they're able to do, what they need to do next, etc., after you analyse their writing. And that's due in week 12. Familiarise yourselves with those assignments. Get the hurdle task done and dusted out of the way, off your plate. We'll go through each of those assignments in much more detail. Always ask questions on the Moodle shell and on the forums, and I will answer them as best I can. Yeah, so that's those. I won't go into that. Make sure also that you understand that your Moodle shell for this unit is packed full of stuff. I want you to learn. I want you to be the best literacy teachers that you can be. So I haven't just, put stuff in there for the sake of it. It's in there because it's important. Therefore, I expect that you actually read it. If you don't, then you won't be able to submit your assignments. So the assignment drop boxes won't unlock unless each of those Moodle books up to week 6 has been read. Okay? Please don't get caught out at the last minute. So where to next? Next week we're going to get into reading, into oral language and vocabulary, which are part of the Big Six and are important for the development of reading and writing and literacy in general. I want you to start your hurdle task, get that done, and ask questions and add to the forums. Okay. Thank you. I hope you have an excellent semester. I'm really excited to work with you, and I look forward to talking and chatting via Moodle.